is really important.
Do you realize, Madam Secretary, with all due respect, how sterile that answer sounds
Let me
for the
finish.
person who's trying, you say, well, you know, that's the mean cost. But right now, somebody's trying to buy groceries in Georgia, and they can't afford it.
Well, but that's because of the Biden administration is the reason.
2 years later, that's your answer? Because of the Biden administration?
Look at this. Look at all the prices that have come down. Avocados down 20%, berries down 13%, butter down 13%, eggs down 90%.
Grocery costs are up. You don't dispute that, right? Even as you call these individual items, you don't dispute that grocery costs are up.
Before this hearing was over, Senator Raphael Warnock and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins were locked in a fierce battle over food prices, struggling farmers, SNAP benefits, and President Trump's economic policies. Warnock accused the administration of making life harder for farmers and working families, while Rollins fired back with a blunt defense of Trump's record, pointing the finger squarely at the previous administration. Then came the moment that changed the entire exchange, when the debate shifted from tariffs and farming costs to grocery bills, food assistance, and who Americans should blame for rising prices. Watch this heated confrontation and decide for yourself who made the stronger case.
Team as well.
Yeah, they're the best. They're the best.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Brother Chairman, and good to see you again.
You too, Senator.
Secretary Rollins. I've heard you say that we're entering the, quote, golden age of American agriculture. I have to tell you that that statement could not be further from what I'm hearing from farmers and from families all across Georgia. Georgia farmers are telling me that they continue to struggle with high costs exacerbated by President Trump's war in Iran and his tariffs, which is a tax on all of us on virtually everything. Secretary Rollins, last week the administration did lower its tariffs on farm equipment by 10%. I think that's a good move. It's a start. I'm afraid that it might be a little too late and a bit too little. Was this action an acknowledgement by the Trump administration that its tariffs have increased the cost of farming?
So I really appreciate the question. I think the president, as our chief negotiator, is constantly tweaking. But what I will say, and I realize you and I could have a much longer conversation about this, that the very tariffs that you're speaking of have instituted or led to the 19 new trade deals that we've implemented. We're going to have higher corn exports, higher ethanol exports, higher tree nut exports, higher dairy exports than practically in American history. So we're cutting that $50 billion agricultural trade deficit in half that we inherited a year and a half ago. And for the farmers, nothing's more important than that market access.
But has it increased the cost of farming? You're forecasting what you think will be the result. But has it increased the cost of farming?
Well, again, the cost of fertilizer was up almost 100% in the what we inherited. The cost of doing business, on average, I won't go through all the numbers. We don't have time, but on average, what we inherited was a 50% input cost. So we brought all of that down. As to the farm equipment, I think the president is very focused on what can we do to get our farmers to profitability. It's a national security issue. So if by removing certain barriers, we can bring down the cost just a little bit, then that's a big win for everyone. What he has said, though, is that what he doesn't want to see happening is the equipment manufacturers pocketing that extra dollar, which a lot argued would actually be the result, that the farmers themselves would not see it. So as part of that announcement, it was to make sure the farmers got that benefit, not the big equipment guys.
So according to Farm Policy News, the president's tariffs have increased input costs by $1 billion for farmers, while erasing billions in access to export markets that you're saying are going to come online if farmers just hold on a little while longer.
Online.
But they're struggling. They are struggling right now. There's no question about it. I talk to them all the time. Since the Supreme Court struck down the president's illegal tariffs, giant corporations have lined up to receive tariff refunds. Madam Secretary, are you pushing in cabinet meetings for farmers to also be reimbursed for the billions in tariff taxes that were passed on to them?
Well, again, the tariff taxes passed on to them, we now, other than a $50 billion ag trade deficit, we've cut that in half. So we've opened up $20+ billion in additional sales for our farmers under this
So
trade
you're not,
renegotiation.
these big corporations, though, they're lining up and they're getting reimbursed.
I'll be happy to look into that. I think that's, I'll talk to Secretary Lutnick. I'm not familiar with all the corporations lining up, but I will look into that, Senator.
All right. So, and it's not just the tariffs, and you know, you've been to, you know, you and I've talked before, and I'm you know, trying to make sure that I'm doing everything I can for farmers and families in Georgia. So, concerned about the ways in which they're struggling. It's planting season, and it's a business, as you know, where the margins are narrow to begin with, and you know, there's so many things that they don't control. And so these margins become really important when you're talking about tariffs. But it's not just the tariffs. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed now for over 100 days, and President Trump's war in Iran has destabilized international fertilizer and fuel markets, skyrocketing costs right in the middle of planting season. Is the administration planning to ask Congress for more taxpayer money to aid farmers so that they can afford the costs of this war?
Well, the war. So I know what you're asking. So yes, let me respond to that directly. And specifically, fertilizer and diesel fuel have been the two, I think, that we've seen significant increase in costs since the strait was closed. But what I think is important, that the fertilizer costs that were inherited increased almost 100%. That had come down 50% before the Iranian conflict. The costs went back up with the Strait of Hormuz closing. Those costs are still lower than the high peak of the Biden years for fertilizer. Having said that, there's still a tremendous amount to work. By the way, that's the same for diesel fuel as well. It come down 50%. The Iranian conflict happened, it popped up, but still lower than during the Biden years. But yes, opening up the markets, reshoring fertilizer back to America. In 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to break ground in Louisiana on what will be the largest fertilizer plant in the world.
So
in the last couple of decades,
let me just point out.
Let me just
point out, because it's really important that context matters.
I agree.
The high peak of the fertilizer costs. We were in the middle of a pandemic, which, you know, we didn't have any control over. It's one thing to have high fertilizer costs because of those kinds of extraneous circumstances. The president took us into a war of choice, which blocked the Strait of Hormuz, and as a result of that, farmers in Georgia are struggling with both increased fuel and increased fertilizer costs. But it's not just farmers that I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about Georgia families. According to the USDA, grocery costs increased about 3% in the last year and expected to increase by another 3.2% this year. And at the same time, this administration has celebrated kicking 3.5 million Americans, including children, off SNAP, a program designed to help our most vulnerable neighbors afford groceries when times are rough. And those neighbors, by the way, are disproportionately in red rural districts. Those communities are struggling. You've supported aid packages for farmers hurt by Trump's policies. Would you also support a food aid package for working families who are just struggling to afford groceries due to increased costs?
So, Senator, the 3% is actually an average cost of food increase over the years. Under the last administration, it went up 20%. But the SNAP, I think, is really important.
Do you realize, Madam Secretary, with all due respect, how sterile that answer sounds for the person who's trying? You say, well, you know, that's the mean cost. But right now, somebody's trying to buy groceries in Georgia, and they can't afford it.
Well, but that's because of the Biden administration is the reason.
2 years later, that's your answer? Because of the Biden administration?
Look at this. Look at all the prices that have come down. Avocados down 20%, berries down 13%, butter down 13%, eggs down 90%.
Grocery costs are up. You don't dispute that, right? Even as you call these individual items, you don't dispute that grocery costs are up in America.
The affordability question in America is real, and the work to bring those costs down continue. And within 1 year, the costs have significantly come down, with a few outliers, coffee, beef, et cetera. But on the SNAP program, sir, no one in Washington or in America wants to see a family go hungry. but the 40% increase in SNAP under the last administration, you said 3.5, it's actually 4.3 million that have moved off of SNAP. No one was kicked off. We have more people working today than ever before. This is a celebration of work and the dignity of work, and wages are higher than they've ever been before. No one has been kicked off. If they're not on the SNAP program, they have chosen not to reapply, or they're an able-bodied adult that can either work for 20 hours a week or volunteer. Those are the only requirements. Anyone with small children is not eligible for SNAP.
There are wages you say are going up. Costs are certainly going up. Healthcare has been doubled for millions of Americans, and they're having to figure out how to make their lives work in the midst of this. Many of them choosing between food and healthcare. Will you reinstate the $500 million in funds for food banks the Trump administration canceled last year, or do you have an alternate plan to help to keep their stocks, their shelf stocked?
Listen, we have moved out, I think, a couple of $1 billion into the pantries in the last year and a half. I know Secretary Rubio said the government is not a charity. We spend $400 million a day on nutrition programs just out of USDA. There is so much money in the system, so much taxpayer dollar, and that's just the federal USDA nutrition programs. That's not state or local. We've got to figure out how to do it better. We've got to figure out how to get it to the people who really need it, the Georgians, as you say, and all across the country, and that's what we're working to do.
I would respectfully disagree with your characterization regarding SNAP. There are a lot of children all across Georgia who are suffering, families trying to put it together, and I think we can do better than that.
But very young children, they're available. So I appreciate that, too. And I appreciate the opportunity to actually have a civil conversation about it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Grassley.
I don't think I'll need 10 minutes to get through this.
You get to use whatever time you want.
What made this exchange so explosive wasn't just the disagreement over tariffs or foreign policy, it was the completely different picture each side painted of America's economy. Senator Raphael Warnock argued that farmers and families are being squeezed by rising costs, higher grocery bills, and reduced government assistance. His focus was on the struggles many Americans are facing right now. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins pushed back hard, arguing that the administration inherited an economic mess and is actively lowering costs, expanding export markets, and moving more people into the workforce. She repeatedly pointed to what she described as failures of the previous administration. The most intense moment came when the debate shifted to SNAP benefits and food affordability, with both sides refusing to back down on who is responsible and what should be done next. In the end, this hearing became much bigger than agriculture. It turned into a battle over the economy, government assistance, and the future direction of America. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest political clashes and congressional showdowns.